My name is Dr. Mark Hale. I live in a small rental on California Street in Socorro, 6 blocks from the university. I used to split my time between the Bosque del Apache, National Wildlife Refuge, and Sevilleta. Now I spend most days walking transects alone, logging what is left. I am recording in my kitchen with a handheld recorder sitting on a stack of bird field guides. The fridge runs sometimes, the solar battery holds a charge when the sky cooperates, and the dog next door, a calm old border collie named Wit, sleeps through most of it. If you hear a dull fan, that is the air purifier that a neighbor and I pulled from the physics building. It helps on smoky days. I'm going to talk straight, one take, and keep it real. This is not a show. This is a record for anyone who needs a steady voice and some practical details in the middle of a life that keeps slipping. Today started at first light, at about 6:15 in the morning. I parked my truck by the west side water control gate, the one with the old padlock someone painted green a long time ago. I strapped on a day pack with alcohol vials, flagging tape, a meter wheel, a folding malaise trap, and 3 yellow pan traps. I marked a 1-kilometer transect along the levee road like I have 100 times. I set the pans in a triangle 10 paces apart, half full of water with a drop of dish soap to break surface tension. A decade ago, those pans would glitter with small bodies in an hour. Beetles, wasps, small flies from families most people never think about. Today, at midday, I poured them out and counted 1 ant, 1 lacewing, and a single leafhopper. That is not a survey. That is absence. The malaise trap used to be the best teacher. You set it. The wind catches the fabric. Insects hit the wall, walk up, and stumble into a collecting jar. Once you learn to tune your eyes, you see seasonal signatures. Early spring bee bounce. Summer wasp glide. Fall fly drift. Now the jar shows dust and a few gnats that look like they got lost. I pulled the jar and stared at it because my brain still expects movement. My brain still thinks the fabric should tremble. It does not. I wrote down the time and the wind speed and the temperature, and I packed everything back into the bag. I got 2 messages while I was out. I am going to read them because they match what I am seeing, and it helps to hear other voices, even if I do not play them. First, from Fresno, California, a pistachio grower named David who sent me a short note last night. He wrote that his trees flushed with flowers right on schedule. He saw good chill hours last winter. Did the pruning, did the irrigation. He rented hives out of habit, fewer than usual, and then he watched nothing happen. He walked his blocks and found a handful of bees on the whole property, and 1 bee was a drone bumblebee hovering like it was confused. His word, confused. He cut into pistachio clusters yesterday and counted non-fertilized flowers in every panicle. He said the orchard feels like a museum. That was his line. It tracks. Pistachios are wind-pollinated, so you would expect some set. But he says the air has been still for days and the trees are dusty and there are fewer catkins than he remembers. He asked if it is pointless to keep irrigating. I told him what I tell everyone now. Water what you can keep alive without risking your own family. Do not sink everything into trees that cannot feed you this year. Save water for drinking and for any vegetables that can set fruit with your help. Second message was from Knoxville, Tennessee, a teacher named Maria who helps run a school garden. She and her students used to hand-pollinate their squash for fun. Now they are doing it every morning at 9 and every evening at 5, with cotton swabs and small paintbrushes. She says yield is still down by half, because they cannot be there on weekends and because they are learning as they go. She asked if shaking tomato blossoms actually works. The answer is yes. Tomatoes self-pollinate. The pollen needs a jolt to move. You can tap the flower cluster with your finger or run an electric toothbrush against the stem for a few seconds. Do not push hard. Do it in the late morning when the blossoms are dry. If you can hear a faint rattle from the flower, you are doing it right. It is not magic. It is physics. Buzz pollination stands in for a bee's chest muscles. I have seen fruit set go from almost nothing to decent with that trick. Keep the plants watered but not soggy. Keep air moving. Do not overfeed with nitrogen or you will grow leaves instead of fruit. Let me back up and give a clean baseline for what is happening in my corner of the world because I get asked the same 3 questions every day. First, what died first? Second, what is holding on? Third, what matters right now if you have a family? The first obvious hit was bumblebees. I monitor 30 bluebird boxes and 20 bumblebee nests as part of a long-running community science program. In a normal spring, we get queens out of overwintering by March, nesting by April. This year, I saw exactly 2 queens. Both were sluggish. One tried to nest under an old gutter down the road from the refuge headquarters and failed. Honeybees fell a few weeks after that across the valley, and wild, solitary bees dropped at the same time. Moths on my porch light vanished. The lights went out on the ground almost as fast as the ones in the air. Beetles, ants, even pill bugs. The whole small world went quiet. What is holding on? A few roaches in town, flies around the wastewater plant, some mosquitoes in pockets where irrigation still runs. It is a messy picture, but here is the part you can plan around. Most grains do not need insects. Wheat is wind-pollinated. Corn is wind-pollinated. Rice is wind-pollinated. Sorghum is wind-pollinated. Those crops can still produce if you can get seed, water, and soil. The problem is supply, transport, irrigation, labor, and all the links you know already. Many fruits and nuts do need insects. Almonds, apples, cherries, blueberries, squash likes help. Cucumbers too. If you are trying to eat in a world with very few insects, lean into grains and tubers if you can, and do small hand pollination for vegetables where it matters. Learn to count flowers and set your expectations by numbers instead of by hope. What matters right now for families? Food and clean air. I am not telling anyone something new there. The clean air part keeps surprising people because when we talk about insects, we talk about food. But I am seeing more burn days now that the forest edge south of Magdalena is dying back. Dead trees mean big fires, and big fires mean smoke. Cities are building clean air rooms in libraries and gymnasiums. They call it air rationing. It is not the oxygen percentage of the atmosphere that is the immediate problem. That will not crash this year. It is smoke and dust and spores in the air, and the fact that hospitals cannot run enough scrubbers for everyone at once, so you get an hour pass. You go in, you sit, you breathe filtered air. Then your hour is done and someone else gets a turn. That is what people mean when they say air is rationed. If you live near a city with those rooms, carry your own mask, rotate filters if you can, and use the room when the index goes bad. If you are rural, get a cheap box fan and a high-rated furnace filter. Seal it with tape and run it off a battery when the smoke pushes in. It is a blunt instrument, but it helps. Bird notes for those who keep sending me the same question. Where did the swallows go? I do not know where they went. I know where they are not. They are not above the irrigation ditches in late afternoon. They are not in the barns. I have not found active mud nests this month. The last time I saw a barn swallow here was late spring. He flared over my truck and was gone. 100 meters along the levee, I found a nest with 2 eggs under the eaves of an old shed near the refuge shop. By the time I checked again, the eggs were cold. Cliff swallows that used to pack the Socorro bridge beams did not return. Violet greens in the foothills were 1 pair only and the nest failed. Warblers stopped on migration in April, but I could count them on one hand. Bats are dropping too. I walked to the old water tower at dusk last week and watched for an hour. No emergence. The guy who helps me with bat counts, Rudy, says the cave near Santa Acacia is quiet now. He used the word wrong. He meant silent. I am being literal on purpose. Reality helps the brain when memory tries to fill in sound that is not there. I want to talk through decomposition for a minute. It is not pleasant, but this is not a time to pretend that uglier truths do not matter. When insects die, you lose a tier of the cleanup crew. Bacteria and fungi keep working. Vultures keep working. Coyotes keep working. But the speed of breakdown drops in places. In the bosque, I have found fish along the bank that stay intact a day longer than they should. I have found field mice that look like they are sleeping, and then you realize the skin is not collapsing the way it used to. The smell lasts. That changes water quality. That changes how safe a wash is after a flood pulse. If you rely on surface water, filter and boil and use a touch of chlorine if you can. I am not trying to scare anyone. I am saying do not trust a stream to clean itself the same way it did last year. Let me run through a basic guide I wrote up for neighbors who are trying to keep gardens going. It works for small farms too. Start with a list of what you need to eat. That sounds obvious, but a lot of folks plant what they remember liking before. Now is not a menu. Now is calories and vitamins and repeatable wins. Grains if you have the land, potatoes in buckets if you do not, beans for protein, and a few high-value greens. For anything that needs pollination help, schedule it like a job. Squash flowers open in the morning. Male flowers have a straight stem. Female flowers have a small squash behind the petals. Pick a male, strip the petals, and brush the anthers against the female stigma until you see pollen stick. Tag the stem with tape so you do not repeat work. Tomatoes. Shake the clusters in late morning when the humidity drops. Peppers self-pollinate, but appreciate a tap. Cucumbers and melons, same male to female trick as squash. Keep a simple notebook. Put the date and what you did. Check set 3 days later. If nothing, try again. Muster a kid brigade if you have kids on the block. Give them all cheap paintbrushes and show them how to do it. Keep it safe. Make it a task with a start and an end. People do better when a day has a job that fits in their hands. If you're in apartment conditions, sprout seeds in trays. Sunflower, alfalfa, radish, anything you can get. Light, water, air. You can feed people decent nutrition with trays of greens in a closet with some grow lights. Power is the bottleneck. Share power. If your building has a generator, learn the schedule. If you have solar, think like an accountant. You get a balance each day. Spend it on light over food before you spend it on entertainment. I'm going to keep talking about electricity because it runs the cleaners, the pumps, and the stomach. It also runs this recorder. I am very aware of that. Midday today, I drove north to the Sevilleta headquarters to check the small museum. I used to volunteer there on Saturdays, talking to hikers about the difference between a fly and a bee. I love that gig. There is a glass case with drawers of pinned specimens collected decades back. You can pull a drawer and see a line of bumblebees from small to large, species labeled in careful handwriting. I ran my finger along the drawer because the glass was dusty and because I wanted to feel something old that still held shape. A graduate student named Theo met me there. He is running a bird point count route and finishing a thesis that is now turning into a field diary. We sat in the shade by the loading dock and ate peanut butter with a spoon. He said his points feel empty. He is counting more corvids because they can find anything and because they are smart. He is counting fewer swallows and flycatchers. He asked what to put it in his abstract now that the work he designed is sliding into another question. I told him the truth. You write what happened. You say what changed. You do not pretend you measured what you did not. He nodded and wrote down a line I said so he would not forget it. At 2 p.m, my phone buzzed with a push alert from a listserv that used to be for birders and gardeners and is now for basic survival tips. Someone in Phoenix asked if the saguaro bloom failed this year. The answer is mixed. Saguaros use bats, birds, and wind. Flowering happened, and some set, but far fewer. Friends in Tucson posted photos of the white blooms anyway, because people need to see a flower. I get it. Just remember you can take a picture of one flower and it tells the truth about one flower only. Food comes from numbers. I am not trying to be tough. I am trying to keep us honest. Let me get very specific and a little technical for folks who want to understand the numbers on a tree in your yard. Fruit set is the fraction of flowers that become fruit. In apples, a decent number is 1 in 20. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on pruning and thinning and weather. If you hand pollinate with a brush from an open flower to a receptive flower, you can move the needle. Step 1. Find a donor flower on a tree that is not the same variety if you can, because apples like cross-pollination. Step 2. Collect pollen onto a small brush. Step 3. Find a flower with a stigma that looks tacky, not dry. Step 4. Touch the brush to the stigma. Step 5. Tag that spur and come back in a week to check swell. If nothing, try again with another donor. If you have one apple tree only, You can graft in a branch from another variety if you can source scion wood from a neighbor. That is late work for this year, but worth learning. I can walk people through that in another session if we have the energy to keep doing this. Food systems news. Central Valley, California. The rental hive business is collapsing. That was always a fragile thing. Beekeepers hauling boxes from almonds to cherries to apples to melons on a schedule that worked as long as the bees stayed alive and the highways stayed open. I got a message from a beekeeper named Aisha in Modesto. She said 2 of her friends sold their trucks because they could not justify fuel and because their colonies are done. She said she is going to keep a few dozen hives for personal use and for community farms, and she is going to plant windrows of rye and empty ground to hold soil. She asked if windrows will help in a no-bee season. Yes, they help with erosion and with reducing dust. Plant whatever will hold. Midwest Report. Iowa State Extension shared a note that corn pollination is normal this season, but yields may still dip for reasons that have nothing to do with insects. Labor, timing, heat stress. If you can plant corn and you can keep it watered, it is still a backbone food. Grind it, eat it fresh, store it dry. Do not treat it like a backyard decoration. Treat it like a staple. Sorghum makes sense in hot, dry places. Old varieties kept families alive before grocery stores. That is not nostalgia. That is a memory that still works in a dry year. Bird rehabbers from Santa Fe called at 4 in the afternoon. They picked up a sharp-shinned hawk that weighed less than a soda can. He was light, and he should have been heavy. It is not all insects with him, but you see the lines. Fewer small birds, fewer insects, fewer bodies in the food chain, fewer calories all around. You can feed a hawk mice. You can feed a community a story about one hawk. Neither changes the graph. The rehabber asked me if they should spend the medication on him. I said yes. We pick what we can save and we keep our hands from going numb while we make decisions. When your city asks you to help at a rehab center or shelter, say yes if your family is fed that day. You need a job that is not doom-scrolling, and that place needs hands. Let us talk air again, because the word ration is new in this context, and it sounds like science fiction when you hear it the first time. Albuquerque is running clean air shelters in 5 locations, a library, 2 high schools, a rec center, and a church basement with a donated commercial scrubber. You sign up, you get a time block. You go in, and the room has filtered, cool air, no smoke, no dust. You get an hour, maybe 2. And if the index spikes, they cut it to 30 minutes. Children and the elderly go first. People with lung conditions have priority. If you live within a bus ride, go. If you cannot go, build that fan and filter box at home and shut the windows. If you live near fire zones, do not run generators indoors or in a garage. Carbon monoxide is still carbon monoxide. That warning never goes out of date. Fair to say it again now that more people are doing power improvisation. One person asked me whether insecticides did this. I'm going to keep the answer short and clean. Insecticides hurt insects. That is their job. They are part of the problem in many places, especially when misused. Climate, habitat loss, disease, and multiple stressors are part of the problem. The sudden speed you felt this year comes from more than one lever moving at once. That matters if you want to assign blame. It matters less if you are trying to keep your pantry full next month. I am a field guy first. I log what is here and I tell you what you can do with your hands. We will need policy later. We need beans and rice and air filters today. My personal life, since I keep mentioning people close to me as names and not saying who they are. My wife is Elena. She is a nurse at Socorro General. She walks to work because gas is a ration card and a line, and she hates both. She says the hospital runs on the tightest margin she has ever seen. She says inhalers go fast on bad air days, and that children show up more with wheeze and with anxiety. She says she keeps a spare set of clothes in her locker because when the smoke is bad, it sticks to scrubs and the laundry backlog is real. When she comes home, we sit at the kitchen table and eat the simplest food we have and talk about one good thing from the day. 9 days out of 10, it is something small. A kid laughed at a sticker. A patient's oxygen held steady. I found one native bee on a flea bane at 9:46 in the morning and watched it do 3 visits. That was yesterday. It was a little metallic green sweat bee, and I wrote down the time because writing times keeps my head straight. We carry 2 things in the truck now when we go into the foothills for field work: a basic first aid kit and a can of bear spray. I get questions about weapons. I own a small revolver, a .38 special because of rattlesnakes in the yard and because that is a choice I made a long time ago. I keep it unloaded in the house. I have not taken it out for months. Most dangers right now are not solved by a gun. Fire, smoke, dehydration, infections, and bad planning do more harm. Pack water. Wear boots. Keep a printed map. Tell someone where you are going and when you will be back. The old outdoor rules did not stop working. Write them on a paper and tape it by the door. International notes, because this is not just our valley. Friends in Nairobi say the sunbirds are thin and the gardens are quiet. A colleague in Germany says orchards had blossoms and then nothing, and that farmers in the Rhineland are tearing out rows to conserve water. A family in Chennai wrote that flies still come to the drains, but that dragonflies have not been seen over the tanks in weeks. A listener in Kiev said linden trees bloomed and smelled like the city used to smell, but bees did not find them, and the flowers browned unvisited. He wrote that he went to the park anyway and sat on a bench and listened. Sometimes you go and do the old thing, even when the thing does not deliver. I respect that. The brain needs a habit to hold. A practical list. Before I forget, if you have a fruit tree and you get any set at all, thin the fruit early. Leave 1 fruit per spur in apples. Do not be greedy. A stress tree with fewer fruit will finish those fruit better than a tree with many that it cannot carry to the end. If you have to cut a tree down to save water for yourself and your family, cut it clean and stack the wood off the ground so termites do not turn it to dust. If you find a hive that is still alive, do not spray it. Call a beekeeper, or if you cannot find one, leave it alone. A living hive is more than honey now. It is a seed bank for pollination that you might use later. If you can plant anything for wind, plant grasses, rye, oats, native bunch grass. If you can plant anything for insects in case a remnant survives, plant composite flowers and keep them watered. If nothing comes, you still kept soil. If something comes in flying or crawling, you gave it a meal. I walked the river edge at dusk and watched the water for mayflies. In a normal year, fish rise and the water looks like it has a pulse. Tonight the river was flat. A great blue heron stood on one leg and stared into nothing. I know better than to project feeling onto a bird. He was hunting. He was doing his job. He stabbed at the water once and missed. On the way back to the truck, I checked a bluebird box. In the spring, I watched a pair try to nest there. They brought grass. They brought a few feathers, no eggs. I cleaned the box out last week. Empty today, too. I ran my finger along the wood. It was warm, the day was hot. That is all the detail means. People read big meaning into small facts when they are scared. I am scared. I try not to make numbers out of that feeling. I try to make numbers out of counts. It helps. Question that keeps repeating: will oxygen run out? I said this earlier and I will say it again cleanly. The oxygen in the atmosphere comes from oceans and from land plants over the long periods. We are not going to run out this year because insects died. The air rationing you hear about is not that. It is clean air shelter scheduling during smoke and dust events. That is still serious. Wear a mask. Prioritize the lungs of your household, but do not let anyone tell you the air will vanish next month. Hold 2 truths at once. We are in crisis. Not every terrifying claim is true. Keep your feet under you. Message from a rancher south of Belen. He said he walked his field at dawn and saw one small bee on a thistle and started crying. He said he did not know he would cry at a thistle. He asked if I think the bee will find another thistle tomorrow. I wrote back and said this: I cannot promise anything about tomorrow. I can tell you that if you see a bee, that means something is still moving. If you have water, give that thistle a liter. Give the next one a liter. If your neighbors will not yell at you for watering a weed, keep a patch alive for your own head and for whatever is left. Yes, thistle is invasive, And yes, we used to pull it every time. We are making new triage lists. We can fight weeds later if later comes. Today you keep food going. Today you keep soil on the ground. Today you keep a few flowers alive for your own sanity and for any survivor insects. If you are a fisherman and you rely on rivers that used to have heavy hatches, change your expectations. Trout eat other things. You can still fish. Pressure your local office for sensible catch limits and for enforcement, because when everything feels like it is ending, people tend to take more. We have to set a floor. We have to keep breeding stock in the water if we want a chance at recovery later. I am not a warden. I am a biologist and a neighbor. I am telling you to check yourself, not to get you in trouble. It is 7:20 in the evening now. Elena is at the hospital on a 12-hour shift that will likely run to 14. I ate rice and canned green chili and a fried egg at the counter. I have 2 batteries for this recorder. One is on the table, charged. The other is down at the last bar. I will stop when it flashes red. Before that, I want to get through this last block of things people can do this week without special gear. Number 1. Build shade. Young plants die more from heat and wind than from anything else in my neighborhood. Stretch a white sheet over a bed, keep it a foot above the leaves, anchor it with whatever you have. Shade cloth works. A thrift store sheet works. Do not cook your plants under black plastic. White or silver. Airflow is king. Number 2. Learn to save seed from what actually grows. That means you plant a row of beans, you see which ones thrive, and you save seeds from those. Dry them fully. Label the jar with the date and the bed. Put it somewhere cool and dry. Do not assume next year's catalog is coming. Make your own. Number 3. Share water schedules with neighbors. Organize by block. If you water at 6 in the morning, your neighbor waters at 7. If you share a cistern, write it down. Nobody remembers a verbal agreement when the heat is rough and the week has pushed them flat. Pen and paper, tape it to a pole. Number 4. Keep one shelf in your house for repair gear for the stuff that feeds you. Spare gaskets for the pressure cooker, extra drip line ends, a replacement belt for the small generator, a pack of filters, a spare fan. I know money is tight. You do not need a store. You need a small pile of the right bits. Number 5. If you have kids, give them one skill a week. This week can be brushing pollen on cucumber flowers. Next week can be swapping a filter. The week after can be reading a water meter. Resist the urge to wrap them in a bubble. The world already popped that. Give them jobs. Praise them when they finish. I want to speak to folks who used to feel far away from land and water. Programmers, baristas, librarians. You have the brains to learn anything. You can build a cheap weather station from a few parts, or you can hang a pie plate and measure rain with a ruler. It all counts. If you want to contribute to something bigger than your block, log your observations and share them with any local group that is still taking reports. There are biologists in every state trying to hold a data line through this. We need ground truth. If you see 1 bee, write where and when. If you see 10, same. If you see a flower set fruit after you brushed it, log that. Keep your maps. If the world recovers enough to study this right, your notes will matter. If it does not, your notes will still have kept your head from drowning in fear. That matters too. A friend asked me last night what recovery would even look like. I do not have a grand answer. I know small ones. Stop mowing every surface down to stubble. Stop spraying every fence line. Keep water in places where insects can drink without drowning. Plant hedges. Plant messy edges. If you run a city, carve out strips along roads that are not just decorative. If you run a farm, bring back cover crops where you can. If you run nothing, plant a pot on a stoop and keep it alive. If any remnant is going to expand again, it will need habitat we held open. I am not saying it will happen. I am saying this is the work you can do if you need a job that is larger than the next hour and smaller than saving the world in one jump. 2 small stories to end the practical part because people keep telling me they need examples more than they need lectures. Example 1. Maria and her class in Knoxville used masking tape on squash stems after hand pollination so they could count success. The numbers told them which plants were worth their mornings. They cut water to the losers. They got fruit off the winners. They served squash in the cafeteria last week. Small scale, real food, example 2. An apartment building in Denver strung a clothesline on the shaded side and used it to hang 24 fabric grow bags. Each bag got 2 potato starts. They ran a cheap drip line off a barrel that got filled twice a week from a rooftop catch. They traded night shift guarding the barrel with the building across the alley. No fights, no heroics. Potatoes at the end. There are hundreds of stories like that now. Collect them. Copy them. Improve them. Share them. I keep thinking about language because I teach when I can, and words matter. We said collapse a lot this year. We should say adjustment more, too. I know that sounds soft. It is not. Adjustment is work. It is a move you make on purpose. The orchard owner who rips out a block and plants sorghum is making an adjustment. The city that opens gym floors for filtered air is making an adjustment. The family that writes a watering schedule on a piece of cardboard is making an adjustment. That is all we are doing. Stacked, one on top of another, until a season changes. I'm going to take a sip of water. The mic will pick it up. I do not care. This is a kitchen, not a studio. There. Cold from the fridge while the battery held. If you have a fridge and it still works, keep a bottle in there. Small comforts feel large when everything else is noise. Okay. The battery icon just blinked for the first time. I can probably get 10 more minutes if the solar charges hold. I want to use that time to read out a few names from messages and to leave you with a promise that fits in the real world, not the pretty one in my head. Jake in Des Moines. You said your grandmother showed you how to save bean seed and you cried when you held the jar. Keep the jar cool. Label it. You did good. Anya in Kiev. You said your son asked where the bees went. You told him they are sleeping. That is okay. He is 5. When he is older, tell him people are trying. Because we are. Luis in El Paso, you sent a photo of a dryer drum turned into a fire-safe outdoor cook stove and 3 neighbors eating from one pan. It looked right. Ruth in Flagstaff, you said your lungs hate smoke and you feel stuck in the house. I am sorry. Use the library air room when you can. Walk halls in the morning. Keep a plant in a pot in the window if you can find one. It will not fix the air. It will give your eyes something green. David in Fresno, I read your note earlier. If you decide to cut that water to the pistachios for a while, log it. Send me your soil moisture and the date. I am building a small data set of choices people make so we can look back and see patterns, not just feelings. While I'm on the subject of logging choices, I want to document what happened here at 4:20 this afternoon because it was one of those small emergencies that forces decisions you do not get to walk back. The city pushed a smoke alert, index in the red from a fire that flared south of Magdalena, where the Pinon Juniper line has gone brittle. The library's clean air room hit capacity. The rec center line stretched into the parking lot. Elena texted from the hospital asking if I had spare filters for a box fan build because pediatrics sent kids home with written instructions and zero gear. I pulled the last 3 MERV 13 filters from the hall closet, taped 2 into a cube with a fan on top, and carried the 3rd to Mrs. Ortega on the corner because she wheezes when the air turns. I logged the time. I walked back and wrote it in the notebook because memory gets soft when the day stacks. If your city is doing air passes now, take the pass. That is not a moral test. You are not weak for using infrastructure that exists. The system in Albuquerque is working better this week than last. They added a church basement on San Mateo with a donated scrubber the size of a fridge. People sit for 30 minutes. Lights are bright. Kids have paper and pencils. Volunteers wipe chairs and swap filters. The room holds 30 at a time. If you show up and it is full, do not argue with the person at the door. Take the next slot. Keep a mask on. Carry a bottle of water. If you run one of those rooms, label the filter change times with a marker and a tape square. It cuts arguments. This is what rationing air looks like in practice. It is not a sci-fi panel discussion. It is a list on a wall and a person with a clipboard saying yes or no for 30 minutes at a time. A few people keep asking what changed with trees if bark beetles and borers are down too. Fair question. Some beetles are down. Some are gone. That does not mean the forest is safe. Drought stress did not stop. Heat did not stop. Seed set dropped because flowers turn into seeds only if something moves the pollen or if wind does the job. Fewer seeds means fewer new trees. Dead trees stack. Fires move through faster. The bosque south of San Antonio, between the refuge and the railroad, has a stand that went yellow early this year. Cottonwoods there send out fluff every spring. This year, the fluff drifted and thinned fast. I walked through last week. The ground was dry under a crust. You step and dust lifts. You do not get replacement trees at the rate you lose old ones. That is how you end up with more open ground and more wind. Not new, just sharper. I'm going to shift into a field build that people asked me to explain slowly. A neighbor in Lemitar set up a shade and drift barrier for a 6-bed garden that is keeping 3 families fed. It is simple enough that anyone with a yard or a small lot can copy it. They drove 4 T-posts along the west side, strung a cable, and hung old white sheets, not touching the plants. They left the bottom open for air. They stood 2 pallets upright along the south edge as a windbreak. They put a shallow tray of water with stones in the corner. Not for bees, there were none that day, but for birds that still patrol the alleys. Birds eat pests. Birds need water. They ran drip tape off a barrel set under a gutter. They hand-pollinate cucurbits at 9 in the morning. They shake tomato clusters at 11. They thin fruit as soon as they see set. They keep a notebook. They hit yields I would not have expected 2 months ago. Copy that if you can. A bigger scene. Tuesday night. A dust front ran up the valley from the south. It was not the biggest I have ever seen, but it was wide, and it moved steady. Fallows west of the river were bare. The wind picked up at 8:30 in the evening. By 9, you could taste grit. I taped the window gaps in the kitchen and put a damp towel at the base of the back door. I ran the filter box until the lights flickered. At 9:20, the grid dipped. Back up. Dipped again. I put the fridge on the solar battery and shut everything else down. I texted the neighbor kid, Aaron, to bring wit inside because that dog is old and because the dust gets into lungs that have no fight left. He wrote back with a thumbs up emoji. The storm passed at 11:40. In the morning, a film sat on everything. You could write with a finger on the truck hood. That dust started as somebody's field, someone's year turned into grit. We are going to see more nights like that. If you live where it happens, seal what you can seal. Sweep with a damp mop. Wear a mask to clean. Bag your filter after a bad night. Swap it. I want to explain a choice I made that felt small but matters in the way your day runs. I unplugged the second lamp in the bedroom and moved the kilowatt hour to the air cleaner. I get about 2 hours extra of filtered air that way on smoky evenings. I sleep with the window shut and the fan on low. I wake up less headachy. If you have power and you are splitting hairs between comfort and air, put the wattage on air first. Your head will be clearer. Clear heads make fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes mean fewer trips to a hospital that is already stretched. That is boring advice. Boring advice is what keeps households upright. Field note from this morning. I checked the east ditch line at Bosque del Apache by the old crane blind. There used to be dragonflies there that patrolled along the reeds. Today, none. I did see one water boatman and a whirligig beetle. I marked the time, 9:23. A pair of ravens moved along the levee, working along the bank for anything that washed up. Ravens adapt. They will keep finding ways to find calories. A great blue heron stood farther down. I watched 15 minutes. He stabbed once and came up with a small carp. Ate it. I logged that. We focus on losses and should, but you hold your sanity by writing down what still functions. It keeps your brain honest. At noon, an alert hit the community channel. The refrigerated tissue bank at the university lab failed. That is where we keep long-term samples from insect surveys. Legs, wings, small vials with ethanol labels. Not sentimental. It is data. The campus generator stumbled on the last fuel allotment and did not carry the load when the grid bumped. I grabbed a cooler and drove over. The building smelled warm in that stale way a lab smells when the air stops moving. We moved what we could into a neighbor's chest freezer 2 blocks over that is tied to a small solar array. We lost some. We saved some. Theo, the grad student I mentioned, carried a tray down the stairs and said nothing for 3 flights. He set it in the back of my truck and leaned against the bumper. We stood there. No speeches. Then we drove. If you run a freezer with anything precious in it, food, samples, insulin, add a cheap temperature alarm, the kind that chirps when it warms. Power fails at 2 in the morning. You sleep. An alarm at least gives you a chance to move fast. I got a second Fresno message after I sent my note to David. This one was from a woman named Priya, who runs a small community plot near Blackstone and Ashland. She said they took down a swing set and used the poles to build a trellis. They hung pie tins to spook birds off the last of their tomatoes. And they found out the birds were not the issue. The fruit trusses were dry, no set. She started using a toothbrush on the clusters at late morning and texted a photo today of 15 small green tomatoes on 4 plants. Small wins. She asked if she should keep a few flowers for bees in case any return. Yes, always yes. Do not carpet with ornamentals if water is tight. 1 patch is enough. 1 patch is a signal and a meal if anything with wings finds you. A city-scale note that matters for planning. Las Cruces rolled out an online scheduling tool for air rooms that uses the same backend as the vaccine appointments from years back. It sends you a barcode and a time. If you're caring for elders, print the pass and hang it by the door. Tape a small bag with their inhaler, a water bottle, and a snack next to it. Put a time in plain marker. People do better when the next move is written down. If your city is still in the first-come, first-served phase, push politely for scheduled blocks. It reduces screaming. Screaming wastes air. I promise more realism and more detail on what not to do because mistakes cost more now. Do not run a generator in a garage. Period. Do not just crack the door. Carbon monoxide does not care about your optimism. Do not set gasoline cans inside a kitchen to keep them safe from theft. They belong outside, in shade, away from flame. Do not burn wood indoors in a barrel without a proper flue. Do not light a charcoal grill inside an apartment because you think the window will draft. It will not. You will go to sleep. Someone will find you. I am being blunt because the hospital is getting more of those. Elena comes home and looks at the table, and I can tell she had a carbon case by the way she sets her bag down. I asked if I should say this on air. She said yes, so I am saying it. I keep a list of calls that come in from outside the valley because they give a wide view. Nairobi wrote again, small update. Sunbirds are fewer, but not gone. Their neighbor recorded one on a window box at 7:12 in the morning. Germany, orchard tear-out continues. Some farms are switching to grains and forage. Chennai, street-level flies persist around drains, but dragonflies absent over tanks. Phoenix, saguaro set is low. Some bad activity, but thinner. Knoxville, school garden got a small flush of squash after the students moved hand pollination to earliest morning before the heat. Kiev, linden bloom fell off without bees. Families still sit on benches for the ritual of it. I am not cherry-picking good news. I'm showing motion. Systems do not drop to zero. They fall, they plateau, they pulse. Your plans should flex with pulses. Back to the valley. I drove to a dairy north of Belen yesterday to look at silage. The owner, Miguel, asked if flies being down would change mastitis pressure in the herd. Some vectoring changes with fewer flies, yes. Cleanliness still rules. He showed me a new lagoon aerator he bought used off a golf course that closed. Smart move. Stagnant water turns nasty faster with heat and with different microbial loads. He is planting sorghum for forage instead of corn this cycle because it holds in heat. He asked if pollination would be an issue. Sorghum is wind-pollinated. He nodded and wrote that down on a tape spine notebook. He said his daughter is learning to weld because the repair shop waits are long. Perfect example of adjustment instead of slogans. Message from Farmington. A family converted a school bus into a clinic shuttle to run elders to air rooms and to pick up prescriptions. They run it on a strict schedule, mornings on even days, afternoons on odd days. They posted the whiteboard at the laundromat. They carry a cooler with water and a tote full of masks. They keep a small toolbox under the back seat and a binder with names and contact numbers. If you build a shuttle, print the route. Do not rely on phones. We had a good sell day today. Tomorrow may not be. I need to talk through a scene from 2 nights ago because it gets at the emotional side nobody wants to say out loud. 2 houses down, a couple had a fight in the yard. The woman wanted to drive to Albuquerque at 10 at night to stand in an airline for their kid. The man wanted to wait for morning because they had gas for 1 round trip, and he was worried about getting stuck in traffic and smoke. They yelled. The kid sat on the step with a towel around his neck. I walked over and handed them my extra pass for the church basement on San Mateo I was planning to give to an older neighbor. I told them the pass was from a friend who could not use it. They took it, said thank you, drove. I texted the older neighbor and said I would sit with her at home and run my filter box for a few hours instead. She nodded and went to bed early. Here is the point. You will get choices where nobody wins. You will choose anyway. Make the choice that reduces harm that hour. Do not grade your whole life on a single night. Do the next right thing and write it down. On insects and decomposition, one more technical note that ties to water safety for those pulling from arroyos and stock tanks. Slower breakdown means biofilm changes. If you see a scum layer that you did not see last year, skim it and do not drink from that surface draw. Boil and filter. Use a few drops of unscented chlorine bleach per gallon after filtering. Let it sit 30 minutes. If water smells strong, aerate by pouring between 2 clean containers. If you have activated carbon, use it after chlorine to clean the taste. Keep a small log of which sources make you sick. That sounds clinical. It is survival. The number of stomach bugs goes up when people improvise water. Elena's ER notes say half the weekend cases are gastrointestinal after power cuts. We can cut that with better hygiene and basic treatment at home. I got a question about wild seed banks. Do we still collect seeds when insect set is low? Yes, collect what exists, label by location, plant, and date. Dry them properly. Store cool and dark. Some grasses and shrubs will still set by wind. You will be tempted to take everything from a single plant when you find it. Do not. Leave some on the stem. Wildlife still eats. Place matters. Diversity matters. If you run a small restoration group, pivot to species that do not rely on insects or that have mixed strategies, and keep records. The day after a crash requires paperwork too. That is how you get back on your feet next season instead of repeating the same guesswork. I said earlier that most dangers right now are not solved by a gun. I will expand. We had a rumor in the town of a group driving around stealing water barrels. Police caught 1 teenager with a siphon hose and a pickup. It was not a gang. It was a dumb kid. The rest of the posts piled on. People locked gates and sat on porches with pistols in their laps. That kind of posture burns fuel and sleep. Put your barrel behind a fence. Get a cheap motion light. Sit with neighbors at dusk and talk about watch hours if you need to. Keep weapons locked until there is a real threat. The hospital does not need more accidental foot wounds, and the town does not need a tragedy in a driveway. Yes, I am being blunt again. It is my town too. International again? 2 quick ones. Spain. Olive groves still bare but irregular set in some regions. Growers thinning early to keep trees from wasting water. Western Australia. Jarrah. Forests quiet. Friends report few moths even on warm nights. A controlled burn jumped a line with a wind shift and turned into a week-long smoke event. You will hear people say the world has ended. It has not. It has changed. I am not smoothing this over. I'm saying you need your head to build a day plan, and the phrase ended does not help you get out of bed and water beds before the sun hits. Let us go practical again. If you're in an apartment and want potatoes, fabric grow bags on the shady side work. Use a light mix. Start with seed pieces with 2 eyes. Plant low. Hill as they grow by adding soil. Water deep and not too often. If you have to carry water upstairs, weigh the cost. A 5-gallon bucket weighs over 40 pounds. Use smaller containers if your back is not accustomed to the load. Keep it simple. Keep injuries out of the picture. A pulled muscle because you wanted to haul a hero bucket is not a good trade. Small win from today that I want to say slowly. At 9:46 in the morning, along the refuge service road near Unit 6, I found a metallic green sweat bee working a fleabane patch. I watched it visit 3 flowers, then lift and move west. I marked the time and the GPS coordinate from the old handheld, and wrote it in the field book. That is one bee. It is not a trend. It is one data point. I am still saying it because the human side of this needs single points along with graphs. You can hold both. Do not build a fantasy off one bee. Do not build despair off one empty pan trap. Stack days. Count. We got a knock at the door an hour ago. Aaron, the neighbor kid, with Whit on a leash. He said his mom is at second job and asked if Whit could stay with us because the dust makes the dog cough when alone. We said yes. Whit is asleep by the fridge. If a neighbor kid asks for help like that, say yes if you can. That is how you keep a block from turning into isolated cubes that people barricade out of fear. Blocks survive. Isolated cubes break. That is not a metaphor. That is me describing how water runs and how favors run. Okay, emergency of the day. Number 2, because days are greedy. At 3:30 this afternoon, the fire jumped a control line west of Magdalena and pushed smoke over us. The hospital moved asthma patients into the old conference room where they had a spare portable scrubber. Elena texted that their triage line stretched into the parking lot and they were doing quick assessments at the curb. I drove to the high school gym because the city pushed a notice that air room hours had been cut to 30 minutes due to demand. The line outside was quiet. You could tell people were saving breath. Inside, volunteers moved patients in and out on the dot. I watched a teenager check filters, write times on tape, and give a thumbs up to the lead volunteer. At 4:10, the power dipped, lights flickered. The scrubbers kept spinning because someone had thought to plug them into a battery backup. That is the level of thinking you need in your building. If something must run, put it on a battery and keep the gas generator for charging, not direct feeding. Charging is smoother. Machines like smooth. On food, because the direct asks keep coming. If you have a small yard, think calories and shelf stability. Beans, corn, squash. Yes, the old trio. Not because it is folklore, but because the shapes fit water and labor limits. Corn for starch, beans for protein, squash for calories and vitamins. Hand-pollinate the squash. Plant dry beans if you need shelf life without canning. Plant dent or flint corn if you plan to store and grind. If you can only plant one, plant a potato bed. A pound of seed gives you a decent return if you water well. Keep tomatoes for morale and for sauce if you have bandwidth. Plant greens in shade for vitamins. Write a harvest plan on the wall, then follow it. I keep being asked if we should leave. Leave where? To what? If you're on a fire edge, yes, you have evacuation zones, and you go when told. If you're in a city that is breaking, and you have a safe, specific place to go with water and a job waiting, consider it. But do not drive into a fantasy. Roads are long. Fuel is finite. The ground is the ground wherever you go. Most of us will stay, and we will adjust. That is not surrender. It is logistics. The house you know, the neighbors you know, the hardware store you know. It all compounds. There is a reason the military units train at home ranges before they deploy. Familiar terrain cuts mistakes in half. A call from a beekeeper in Taos named Luis. He has 6 surviving colonies tucked in a north-facing arroyo where the heat is lower and the wind is strange. He asked if he should split them to seed more hives. I said no. It is tempting to push. Late season splits on marginal colonies die. Feed what you have, keep them alive. If fall gives you strength, split one. Keep records. He said he planted sunflowers in a late buckwheat strip along a wet spot. Good. Buckwheat blooms quick. If you have any bees, plant buckwheat. If you have none, plant cover anyway. Soil first. I need to put in a word about heat injury because the ER is seeing it more with the labor shifts. Hydrate. Salt. Do not chase heat with alcohol. If someone stops sweating and gets confused, cool them now, not later. Shade, water, loosen clothing. If you have a tub, cool water immersion. If not, wet towels and a fan. Do not bury people in ice. You want core cooling? Steady, not shock. Kids and older adults crash fast. Set timers on phones for water breaks during a yard work. People forget when they are focused. Let me answer the oxygen question one more time because a YouTube channel pushed a clip that got people spun up. No, the world is not losing oxygen in months because insects died. Oceans carry that load across years and centuries. Land plants are part of the balance, yes. Trees dying is serious, yes. The number that matters in your kitchen this week is particulate matter in your lungs and the airflow in your rooms. That is why the city rations air room time. That is why we tape filters to fans. Hold big facts in your head, but do not let a fake countdown rob your focus. A story to ground us. Elena came home after midnight last night and put a small container on the counter. Inside were 2 sunflowers from a patient's kid. The kid had grown them in a pot by a south window and hand-watered every morning. He gave one to the nurse who stayed late to get his mother's breathing right. The flower is not a symbol. It is a plant with seeds, if we get that far. We put it in water and set it by the window because a yellow head in a room makes eyes rest for a second, and because later I will dry it and save the seed. That is a complete circle in a kitchen. That is a plan. Okay, I am going to switch to a block of direct answers from today's queue, then close with a real-time update and tomorrow's plan. Question. How do I tell male from female squash flowers in low light? Answer. Look for the small fruit behind the petals. That is the ovary. If there is a tiny squash behind the blossom, it is female. The male has a straight stem. Use a headlamp if you have one. Work in the morning? Question. Can I graft 2 apple varieties in midsummer in New York? Answer. Risky. Spring is better. If you must, try a chip bud. In late summer when bark still slips. Wrap tight. Shade the union. Do not count on it. Question. Do hummingbirds help pollinate tomatoes? Answer. Not in a way that matters. Tomatoes self-pollinate. Give the cluster a tap or use a toothbrush. Hummingbirds are great for your head. Plant salvia if you have water. Question. Do I need bees for peppers? Answer. No. Peppers self-pollinate. A gentle shake helps. Keep nights below 80 if you can for better set. That means shade and airflow. Real-time update. The smoke index just dropped from red to orange on the state site. Wind shifted. I opened the back door for 3 minutes to flush the room and then shut it again. The filter has a layer of gray that was not there this morning. I will swap it after this recording. If you use cube filters, write swap dates on the frame. It keeps you honest. Tomorrow's plan. Pre-dawn transect at the river. A 2-kilometer loop, starting at the crane platform and ending near the railroad trestle. Yellow pan traps at the first and last quarter. Malay's trap in the middle. A sweep net along the willow line. I will check the museum freezer temp at the university, then swing by the high school to drop off 2 filters for the volunteer crew. I will sit in the truck at noon and log messages and answer 3 that require math. In the evening, I will help Aaron build the bucket garden for his mother on the concrete strip behind their duplex because she works late and deserves basil that does not cost a fight in the store line. That is the whole list. If the fire shifts, I will cut the middle and run air duty at the gym. That is how plans survive a day. They flex, but they exist. I am getting low on the second battery. I have enough for a few more things and I want to use them on what you ask for. The dramatic, the immersive, the part that feels like a plot when it is really just a string of hard days. Here is the string. 3 days ago, a family from Polvidera pulled a flatbed up to the floodplain with blue barrels strapped down. They set up a gas pump and pulled from a silty elbow of the river because their well went brackish, and the city cut agricultural deliveries. They filtered through cloth, chlorinated, and hauled back for a small goat herd and a strip of corn behind their trailer. On the return trip, a belt on the truck snapped 2 miles from home. The dad walked, got a neighbor, and they towed it with a tractor. The corn is up to his knees. He asked if wind alone will pollinate it. Yes. He asked if he should do anything else. I said plant a second strip at 90 degrees to the first so the wind has more paths. He nodded and said he would handshake the tassels at noon anyway because he needed a job for his hands. That is a scene, not a movie, just a family getting through a week. Yesterday, a student at New Mexico Tech who used to work in the machine shop welded a frame for a bike-powered generator in the courtyard of her apartment complex on Neal Avenue. She printed a schedule. Kids took 10-minute shifts pedaling to charge a battery bank that runs the stairwell lights and a small air filter in the lobby. Parents stood around with water bottles and talked about recipes. Someone played a cracked guitar. It was not happiness. It was air and light, and kids doing a job that tired them out before bed. If your building has a courtyard, steal that idea. Pedal power is not a grid. It is a light and a fan and a little dignity. Last one, and then I will close. This morning, before the sun cleared the manzanos, I took the long way to the refuge to check a cottonwood stand I have been avoiding because I did not want to count dead trunks. On the way, I passed a yard with 2 5-gallon buckets lined up like soldiers under a spigot. A note on a nail said, "Water for plants only, take one." Someone had decided to share their pressure while we still have it. I parked, walked to the cottonwoods, and started at the edge. I counted living crowns. I counted dead crowns. I wrote numbers. A man walked up with a dog, and we stood there and did not say much. He said he used to bring his father here to watch cranes. He said he brought his father's hat now and sat on the bench. He asked if the cranes would come back. I said yes. I said it because cranes are still around, and because migration is not one thing, and because there is no point in feeding a stranger a black hole when he is asking for a line to hold. Then I wrote down the numbers, walked back to the truck, and stared at the fleabane patch until the one bee showed up. That is the true order. Hard count, human moment, small win. The battery icon is blinking again. I have rice cooling on the stove and Wit is snoring. Elena texts that she will be home around 1 in the morning if the shift does not stretch. I am going to stop here. I will charge this recorder off the panel if we get a clear morning. I will keep counting and keep reading your notes and keep giving you plans that fit into human hands. I am not a hero, and I am not a prophet. I am a field biologist in a kitchen with a stack of bird guides and a filter fan that needs a new square of tape. I will be here tomorrow. Same voice, same block, same job. Keep sending real numbers. Keep your air clean when you can, water safe, food simple, and your lists written. If you try something that works, tell me. I will tell other people. That is how we climb a season. Good night.